You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good morning, I'm Fred Childers. I hope you're having a great weekend. I want to thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Louisiana has made some major investments in protecting and restoring its coast, but the money that is paying for such investments is nearing the end. Now the state is looking for how to keep the ball rolling and replace those funds. Capitol reporter Shannon Hecht caught up with CPRA to hear their plans.
Louisiana's coast is disappearing. The Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority has spent billions of dollars working to slow that loss.
We're in a race against time.
These historic investments into projects such as restoring the barrier islands, building marsh, and fortifying levees were largely funded by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Those billions of dollars are set to run out in just 9 years.
Without significant funding, without the political will to get that significant funding that is needed, that progress is going to halt.
Without action, the Coastal Master Plan shows that many coastal communities could see several feet of storm surge in future hurricanes.
And that master plan can result in literally hundreds of square miles of our coast being here 50 years from now that wouldn't otherwise be there, and literally reduce risk to a level less than we experience today.
There is legislation in Washington aimed at bringing more money in from offshore energy production. And there's local bills to get a share of alternative energy production on state land, similar to oil. CPRA leaders say that they face a challenge of convincing legislators to make these changes now, before the fiscal cliff hits.
It affects every single aspect. And so without flood protection, without coastal restoration, nothing else really matters.
Without the oil spill money, the state will return to only about $200 million being put towards these projects, compared to this year where $1.7 billion is projected to be spent. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht.
Conservative Republicans in the Louisiana House of Representatives announced the new Louisiana Freedom Caucus. It is a mirror of the House Freedom Caucus in Congress. Louisiana is the 11th state to create one back home. Some members include Representative Alan Seabaugh, Representative Larry Freeman, and Representative Beryl Amedee. It is the policy of the Louisiana Freedom Caucus to not ever release a list of members, which no other state caucus does. A few others who have added their names include Representative Kathy Edmondson and Danny McCormick. Democrats in Louisiana are giving their support to two Tennessee Democratic House members who were expelled from the chamber this week. Republicans in Tennessee voted to kick 3 Democrats out of the state's House of Representatives a week after the group led gun control protesters in Chance. House Democratic Caucus leader Sam Jenkins said in a statement, quote, "The Tennessee legislature's shocking actions represent an unconscionable assault on our democracy and a violation of the solemn responsibility entrusted to the legislature by the people of Tennessee." Well, if you're under the age of 21, you may not be able to get into bars much longer. A state senator is proposing a bill following the death of LSU student Madison Brooks. The goal is to prevent underage drinking and make it more difficult for young adults to get alcohol. Not everyone is behind the idea, of course, going so far as to say the drinking age should actually be lowered.
I went to college in New York State, and the thing I looked forward to about coming back to Louisiana was the fact that you could go to bars. So as someone who lived in a state where it was 21 plus, it was detrimental to a lot of the businesses there because the youth wanted to support a lot of places and couldn't do that.
While the goal of the proposed bill is to make it more difficult for young adults to get alcohol, residents here say legislators should look at other solutions as well. This year, lawmakers are putting the insurance crisis at the forefront of the legislative session upcoming. The Department of Insurance unveiled its package of bills on Tuesday. One measure asks the state for $20 million to put towards the incentive fund to draw companies to the state. The insurance commissioner believes this will lead to at least 50,000 new policies by the end of the first of the year.
If all that money gets used, that's going to translate into about $250 million of premium written in Louisiana. I think 50% of that will be below I-10 and I-12. So the idea is to get these policies out of citizens as quickly as possible.
Commissioner Donlin also wants $20 million to go to the Fortify Roofs program. It will help homeowners build stronger roofs. By the way, we'll talk more about the session a little later with our Shannon Hecht. Stay with us for that. Well, this week, state leaders and community leaders gathered at the Capitol for the Early Childhood Education Summit. They touted the successes from decades of research into early childhood education. The Louisiana Policy Institute for Children and the United Way of Southeast Louisiana presented the report, which was funded with support from Entergy Corporation. Governor John Bel Edwards said it's important kids have access to this education.
We know it's going to take a sustained and multifaceted effort of programs and funding across a generation to ensure that our young children and families are set up for success.
According to the report, a majority of brain development takes place during the first 3 years of a child's life, prompting leaders from the government, the private sector, and nonprofits to ensure early childhood education is expanded across the state. As legislators prepare to debate the state's budget, the state treasurer weighed in on the proposals to reform the state's tax code. One bill looks to do away with the state's income tax. Treasurer John Schroeder, who is also running for governor, says he agrees it needs to be done to attract people to the state, but it is not something that can happen overnight.
But the mindset and the perception is we need to do it. I'm happy to work on that project. It's not something new, but you have to replace 40 cents on a dollar.
Recent debates over the industrial tax exemption program known as ITEP have called into question how much locals should have say over tax breaks for corporations. Treasurer Schroeder says the companies are important, but locals should get a say in what happens. All the major candidates for governor met at a forum hosted by small business organizations this week. All the campaigns had a lot of ideas of what they wish to work on, but how it'll happen has not been determined yet. Capitol reporter Shannon Hecht shares with us how candidates are still working to get their names out there.
The 5 Republicans, 1 Independent, and 1 Democrat answered a series of questions aimed at assuring small businesses that they will get support should one be elected. At this stage in the race, most candidates are trying to get their core messages out,
I do believe government needs to be more like a business,
while holding on to how they will implement their plans. Education is top of mind for parents across the state, and Sharon Hewitt and Richard Nelson both have legislation filed this year to address literacy and math.
We have to have a world-class education system.
All these things, workforce development, graduation rates, all this stuff, it's all driven by kids being able to read.
Members of the Restaurant Association, the Retailers Association, and NFIB wanted to know how they will fill their workforce.
If we reinvent high school and say we're going to find out which each category those kids are in, and we're going to give them the best path to success.
How will they fix the crime issue that also plagues businesses? They all agree it must be done.
You think reducing income tax and not fixing crime is going to bring business in?
But how will they put their plans into place?
We can fix this problem with crime, and we got to fix it by hiring law enforcement people, training them.
We have to do a better job of funding law enforcement and not just struggling to talk about doing that or taking resources from our local government.
It is still early in the election year with qualifying months away, so there's still plenty of time for candidates to get into the weeds of how they will change Louisiana if they're elected. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht.
Be interesting. Coming up, Louisiana Congressman is pushing a bill that promises to lower energy costs, but he's got a fight on his hands. We'll have that exclusive interview next.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Last Thursday, Congress passed the Lower Energy Cost Act introduced by Majority Leader Steve Scalise. WGNO's Brittany Dixon sat down exclusively with the Louisiana congressman in Washington to find out how Louisianans can benefit if the bill makes it to the president's desk.
Leader Scalise says Louisiana can help lead the way to becoming energy independent. But this bill that passed the House without Democratic support is going to face a few more hurdles before that can happen.
We should be investing money into making sure that we have safe communities. This doesn't.
Majority Leader Steve Scalise slamming the Biden administration for its role in developing domestic energy. But the president is his biggest challenge in making this bill a reality.
Now, I don't think the Democratic White House is going to embrace H.R. 1, Steve's bill. But I do think it gives us a negotiating tool. Okay, what do you want? Okay, this is what we want. Now, if you want to get what you want, then we maybe need to get some of what we want.
We sat down exclusively with Scalise last week to learn what exactly that is.
I was also able to include language that gave parity in revenue sharing to states like Louisiana that develop energy in the deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico. States that develop oil onshore get 50% of the revenue that the federal government receives. Offshore, it's only 37.5%. And so that disparity is something we've been trying to fix for a long time.
But that's not what Congressman Troy Carter believes should be the priority.
Leader Scalise and I were the lead authors on the BREEZE Act. We see the value of being able to use wind energy and making sure that those proceeds continue to come in and are protecting our coastline.
With the bill's fate unknown in the Senate, Senator John Kennedy is trying to lead it to Biden's desk.
Because the American people need and deserve affordable, plentiful, accessible energy. And I'm pretty much an all-of-the-above energy type of guy.
What's been the input from constituents on this bill?
I think people are really excited about it. They want to pay less energy costs, so lowering their cost of gasoline at the pump is going to help a lot of families.
In Washington, Brittany Dixon, WGNO News.
Help is on the way for the state's shrimping industry. Louisiana Congressman Clay Higgins has requested an increase in price and stricter inspections on imported shrimp. He sent a letter to the Food and Drug Administration making that request. This follows reports of a virus known as white spot found in frozen shrimp from India. This virus can be very contagious and leave a negative impact on the industry.
It'd be a good idea to check that stuff good because we got strict laws here. When you go across state lines, everything got to meet certain high specs. Why shouldn't foreign shrimp meet them same specs? I've been in this a long time, 50 years at least, and it's had its ups and its downs, but this is the worst I've seen it in my lifetime right now.
And experts, of course, say it'll take a lot of work. Senator John Kennedy pushing to re-implement a banned technique in the New Orleans Police Department. You've probably heard of it. It's called stop and frisk. Brittany Dixon tells us how New Orleans top cop feels about the remarks from the senator.
Stop and frisk is a legal, constitutional, law enforcement a procedure that is used every day throughout America in every other states.
Kennedy taking to the Senate floor in what he calls a speech, standing up for crime victims in New Orleans. He claims stop and frisk is the solution to violent crime.
We tried everything. We've tried recruiting more cops, paying better wages. We've tried 12-hour shifts. We've tried educational opportunities. We've tried youth clubs. We've tried curfews.
But the senator told us in an exclusive interview in Washington that he knew his speech would come with controversy.
Stopping someone in frisk just because you unilaterally think that they may be a threat is a danger. I mean, it is proven over and over again to be more of a problem than a solution.
Congressman Carter tells us he believes the procedure is discriminatory, but Kennedy argues against that. Earlier this week, we asked the NOPD where they stand.
We are under a federal consent decree, and My intention is to do everything that we are supposed to do in line with the consent decree, and that encompasses constitutional, bias-free policing, and we're going to do that.
But according to Kennedy, it's the way to save the city from violent crime.
New Orleans is a gem, and we're losing it. And this crime, it's affecting every part of the city, every income class. It hits the poor the hardest, and we need to try what has worked in other states.
In Washington, Brittany Dixon, WGNO News.
Coming up, Shannon Hecht will join us to talk about the upcoming legislative session and what we can expect from state lawmakers. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back to This Week in Louisiana Politics. As promised, I'm joined on the desk here by our political reporter, Shannon Hecht. She's here to talk about what's happening tomorrow at the legislative session. Shannon, what's on your radar?
Well, it's finally here, whether you're ready or not, and there's going to be a lot of topics covered in just this short session. It's a fiscal year, so it's only 2 months, and there is a limitation to the number of bills that people can bring. They can only have 5 non-tax related bills, but there's plenty of controversial bills already packed into that limited number.
Are they going to discuss the budget as well?
Yeah, they find time to bring it in there, and this budget is really interesting because a lot are believing that this is the last budget where we have, everyone plays nice. We have all this extra money, these surplus and excess that we've been enjoying through most of John Bell's administration. With the half-cent sales tax rolling off at the end of next year, many are starting to get a little nervous of how we're going to replace that revenue. And obviously, it being an election year, many people want to cut taxes or change them. So we'll see if that actually comes true.
Funny how that always happens around an election year. We're going to cut your taxes. We're not going to raise them. So I'm sure there are going to be lots of debates. There always is concerning the budget and taxes. Are there any other really controversial bills?
Yeah, there's plenty coming down the pike. So there's going to be, like the Nationals, a debate around gender and pronouns. There's a couple bills. One that would deny gender-affirming care for transgender youth. That bill was brought last year but did not get any hearing. So I'll be curious to see if it gets brought up or how far it goes. There's also one that would prohibit teachers from using pronouns for students that do not align with the sex on their birth certificate, so that's kind of mirroring a lot of the debate. And there's also a few bills regarding abortion. Louisiana has one of the most restrictive abortion laws, as we know, and so there are bills looking to add exceptions to rape and incest, and also some to clarify some of the non-viable pregnancy definition that has caused a lot of confusion since the trigger law went into place.
There's even a bill by Katrina Jackson that allows you to claim a fetus for tax purposes.
Yeah, she has a bill that would allow you to claim your fetus as a dependent on your taxes. And so this is also a much bigger debate than maybe some realize, that if you do this, it gives personhood to the moment of conception, which could impact a whole lot of different things, such as inheritance and other laws, and it could potentially make abortion considered homicide, of killing a person. So it'll be a lot of interesting discussion around that bill for sure.
And she's no stranger to this debate. She's the one who brought the abortion bills, what was it, last year?
Just last year, yes. So she's very familiar. She's a Democrat, obviously, and so It's an interesting debate around Katrina Jackson, so we'll be watching that one closely.
That is interesting. She's a Democrat, also the governor, who has also said he is pro-life. So she has his support, I would imagine.
Potentially, he's obviously very pro anti-abortion rights, and but he has said that he is in favor of the rape and incest exceptions. So it'll be curious to see if he can get other Democrats on board with that.
Right, and this session starts tomorrow. How long does it last?
It goes until June 8th, I believe is the day. So it's a very jam-packed session. We can expect a lot on tax reform. So there's proposals to do away with the income tax that Richard Nelson, who's running for governor, is really campaigning on. The big question is, how do you replace all that revenue? People want to do away with the franchise tax and also maybe trim back on the credits that we give big corporations and the tax cuts they get. So there's a lot going on with taxes this year.
And for those of you who don't know, we send Shannon down there pretty much every day. She lives down at the Capitol during the legislative session. So we appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you, Fred. I'll be reporting every day for y'all.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Looking ahead to the coming week, in case you haven't heard us say it enough, the legislative session begins tomorrow. We're obviously pretty excited about it. Governor John Bel Edwards will be giving his final State of the State address. We will have the daily updates on legislation being moved over the next 2 months. On Wednesday, the Bond Commission will be meeting at the state capitol. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. Stay informed, and I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.